Hello, and welcome to Introducing Me. I'm your host, Sarah. I started this podcast to get to know other people and lifestyles while discovering more about myself. Each episode, I'll give a new guest a chance to discuss their background, culture, interests, or whatever they want to talk about to help increase all of our own worldviews. Today, I'd like to introduce you to Neil Laird. Neil spent 25 years traveling the globe as a historical documentary producer, producing over 100 programs. And as a member of the LGBTQIA plus community, Neil is now writing a series of comedic novels. So he is here to talk about, his life, work, travel, sexuality. He's got a lot of great things going on, so I'm excited to have Neil here today. So thank you so much, Neil. Why don't you go ahead and tell the audience more about yourself?
That's quite an intro. Throwing everything in the kitchen sink at them, you said it quite well there. Yeah, I'm a queer filmmaker and novelist, and I've been working in network television here in the States for 25 years or so. My passion has always been ancient history and travel, and I was able to marry those two and sell my thesis film about the Great Sphinx of Egypt 120 years ago to the networks, and I've been doing that ever since. Just finished up a stint at Science Channel as a National Geographic. But one thing that I really discovered that I always fell in love, that I became very fascinated and enamored with in my travels, but I couldn't tell in my documentaries, was gay life in the ancient world and how different it is than today. And that's one thing that I think a lot of people don't think about. We assume that progress always marches forward, that today is always better than yesterday, and we'll always get more enlightened. And certainly when it comes to sexuality, it's quite the opposite in many regards. And particularly my interest is Egypt, Rome, and Greece, the Eastern Mediterranean, some of the Indus Valley. And almost all of them are far more embracing of same-sex love and accepting of gay and queer and lesbian and transgender identity in a way that's not. So my books are very much folding those fascinations into the other thing that I kind of miss doing as a documentary filmmaker, is making shit up. Where basically, I was a nonfiction filmmaker and everything had to be footnoted. And here, this is a time travel comedy about a feckless TV crew, like many that I've worked with and at one time was, traveling back in time and making documentaries about the ancient world, always in over their head. The first one, they go through the 12 hours of the Egyptian underworld to save a mummy. And the second one I just finished, which comes out in September, they go back to Pompeii and they want to get the ultimate award-winning documentary with drones and fancy cameras before Vesuvius erupts. So they had the comedic stuff, but in all of them too, they also all have gay love stories and very strong gay characters. Jared comes out in the first book and deals with sexuality. In the second book, Kara, the camera woman, very much based on people I know, she falls in love with a real life person in ancient Pompeii, Julia Felix, and asks, can she fuck with history and save somebody, that's supposed to die. So it's, all of them have love stories and love affairs, and all that it was born out of me just wanting to tell positive queer stories, which so often are just don't show up in either TV or film.
Yeah. So because you really wanted to put, queer stories out there through your writing, and specifically positive queer stories, was your experience being a filmmaker and being queer, was that positive?
When coming out or just dealing with it? I mean, obviously it was a very awkward thing because I started making these films in my early 20s, and just before I came out, and I was raised a Catholic boy in Western Pennsylvania, and still loving parents who have now accepted me. But clearly all of that was something you just didn't talk about. That coupled with where I was traveling to, the Middle East, Muslim countries, where all that stuff is very much, people are more than wary. You have to be careful who you are and what you do. So coming to terms with my sexuality and coming out and embracing it, it was very curious that I found myself in so many different situations around the world. And in most cases, I never had any problems with it, but it was in my own head, like everybody before they come out. What you think is far worse than actually what the reality is when you do come out. So a lot of that is the muck that I think is stuck in your head before anybody comes out, whether you do it in Pennsylvania, whether you do it in Cairo, or wherever else. It's just what you expect people to do. And my character, Jared Plumber, the lead character, is very much me in that regard, I think. When I was a young producer coming out, in love with that world, but also kind of understand my own place in it.
And so when you were doing the documentary work and you were, having to show historical life, were you able to kind of bring in any sexuality into it, or were you kind of pigeonholed into focusing more on like what we typically think of when we think about the ancient history?
Yeah, unfortunately, it's a very awkward thing. If you work in the media industry, whether it's publishing or film or video or music, you know that all the people working in it are very queer friendly, but often the people they're making it for are not. So we're often our own worst enemies where we silence ourselves because we're afraid what they're going to think down in Kentucky, or how, is it going to sell as much if we have a queer character. So working for Discovery Channel, I work with wonderful people, gay, straight, lesbian, everything in between, very embracing culture there, National Geographic the same, but we didn't put that stuff in the documentaries because it was, at the end of the day, it was a product. And at the end of the day, it had to sell. And you don't want to offend anybody. So you really, even though, I remember one time we were talking, Discovery Channel, and I work for a small network called the Science Channel, which just went belly up last year, which is why I'm, have more time to write because the entire network went away, including me. And we did archaeology and history and space and engineering. But the mothership, Discovery Channel, did all the sort of redneck programming, the Monster Garage stuff, and the Naked and Afraid and Deadliest Catch, real manly stuff, what we call the sea counties, which already is sort of a derogatory term. But what that kind of meant, you're making it for people that do not understand or embrace our lifestyle. And I remember sitting around talking about, there was one scene where one of the characters in a long defunct show came out gay, and it was a beautiful little scene. And I looked around at everybody who was in the room, and the head of programming was this tough, butch-looking lesbian who was this great, smart woman, and she was the first to say, yeah, we got to cut it out. Because, again, we are the slaves to who pays our lovely salary, like so much of it. So another reason I was able to embrace that when I went on the books, because I can say and do whatever I want. And publishing is the same way. They want to embrace that, but it very much on their own terms. Look, it's a product. Everything is. You look at it. If you're making it for the masses, there are rules to follow. And unfortunately, as forward-thinking as we who are the media leaders are, it's not necessarily what we produce.
Right. So then when you were learning all of this history and exploring the ancient times, what sort of queer history did you learn that you couldn't necessarily put on the screen?
Well, that's a good question. I think it wasn't even a question of, oh, this is right and this is wrong. They just didn't want it. The story, look, and it's even less, and I don't make it sound like it's just homophobic, because there's other stories. If you watch any documentary on National Geographic or History Channel, we go over the same bloody tropes over and over again. It's Cleopatra and King Tut, and it's Pompeii or whatever, which I love, but it's the same story. People are afraid to try new things. So we did a wonderful documentary about Black pharaohs, about the Nubian pharaohs, and that was a tough sell because people were worried, as great as it was, it's a culture that the last 26th dynasty of Egypt towards the end, they took back the country, and they were all from Nubia, so they were all dark-skinned. And of course, they didn't advertise it. They didn't know what to do with it. They thought that it was good in terms of promoting and showing the Enlightenment, but those are not the things that unfortunately hit Middle America, they think. So it's not so much that we can't talk about certain things. It's just not produced. It's just not a ratings grabber. It's just like anything. It's funny when you go on television too, and I don't want to sidetrack away from sexuality, but even in history, we have a list of do's and don'ts in terms of what rates. Like World War I does not rate, but World War II does. The Civil War rates, but the Revolutionary War does not. Dogs rate, but cats don't. Horses rates, but sharks always rate. That's why I get an entire week right now, Shark Week. So there literally is broken down in terms of everything, in terms of what is a ratings getter. And a lot of that stuff can be very hoary and old, so we don't have to update it much. And gay life, sexuality, it wasn't even on the list.
So what sort of stories would you want to have shared if you didn't have to kind of follow this ratings guide?
Well, one thing I have been doing, since I do a series of videos on TikTok and Instagram called Gay_History, which is also about the book too, but it explores gay sexuality in ancient history, and each one features famous gays in history to know about: Emperor Hadrian, Alexander the Great, Sappho, the cut sleeve story of China. I think one of my favorite stories, and one of those eye-opening sites I've ever seen. When this was before it even came out, I think I was still on my first trip to Egypt. I knew I was gay, but it hadn't come out yet. There's a site. Have you been to Egypt?
I have not.
Well, you must put on your list. If you go, I'll hook you up. I'll tell you who to meet. But there's a site called Saqqara. Have you ever seen it? It's a step pyramid. It kind of looks, it's the oldest pyramid ever. And it's a graveyard. It's an necropolis of tombs. And some of the best preserved from the elite, from the fourth dynasty. So anybody buried there had the pharaoh's blessing to be buried next to the pyramid. These were the creme de la creme of ancient Egypt, of Old Kingdom Egypt. Nobody could even walk on there, let alone be buried there. And there is a tomb, ironically today, called the Tomb of the Brothers. And this is two gay guys who loved each other and married. And it's the oldest known example of same-sex love in the world. People dispute and say, well, it doesn't say anywhere that, these two guys are in love. But there are images of the frescoes of them holding hands, fishing, laughing. There's this famous fresco above their two sarcophagi that are leaned up together. They go into the underworld together, the duat. And it's them nose to nose. It's a beautiful image. And nose to nose in ancient Egypt was kissing. That was the Egyptian form of kissing. These are two men who loved each other so much. One was the manicurist for the pharaoh. One was the hairdresser for the pharaoh. I mean, it's all right there, As a gay man, I can make that joke. But it proves two things. One is that back in that this couple could have the same respect and the same regard as a straight couple. And everything. And obviously they served the pharaoh and they went to eternity arm in arm. Now in there you do see like little small figures of what was probably their wives and their kids, very small in the background, almost like at the tick a box. But you jump ahead, and the great irony of how much things have changed, it's called the Tomb of the Brothers, because when it was found in like 1963, you could not say these were two gay guys that in ancient Egypt, because that was just an affront to everything that we stand for. So some people say they're brothers. Like I've never went nose to nose with my brother like that. Other people claim, even more outrageously, they were Siamese twins, and the only reason they're facing each other because they were melded together and they couldn't look away from each other. They bent over backwards in their homophobia to dismiss this. So me seeing this as a young kid at 24 saying, holy shit, it's right here. Here's the sexuality that is celebrated by the ancient Egyptians 4,500 years ago. And the guy outside calls the Tomb of the Brothers. So history does not always march forward.
So are you then using, you mentioned like videos on TikTok and Instagram. Are you using those platforms to get some of these stories out there?
Yes, yeah, precisely. I have a series, and I did it, largely because I'm promoting the book, which is about gay life and all these different things. But I also I don't want to just pitch a book and talk about this. I want to talk about one of the things near and dear to me is sexuality in the ancient world, and I love the ancient world. I mean, I'm fascinated by the Middle Ages and the Renaissance, but something about the ancient world speaks to me. That's my little slice of the pie. So all these videos are just 2-minute videos of famous people plucked from the past, all positive stories, even if they end tragically, which sometimes they do. It's not the decadent underbelly that Christianity, when it came along and reared its head, made it to be. These are people that they were out in the open, and there's two characters that figure very strongly in my second book, Primetime Pompeii, that comes out in the early fall. Is people call it the Veti? They call it the two Veti brothers. Again, they call them brothers. But these people, have you been to Pompeii?
I have not.
Oh, I can help you there. We'll talk afterwards. And you don't know, and we don't know if the Veti were gay or not. But you walk in their house and it's a pleasure palace. There are more penises hanging, more like oversized penises everywhere, and it is the god of fertility. But you can tell this is a playpen for a lot of very rich, sexually active gay men and perhaps women. And these two men were both. They were not related. They're both two freedmen that got their freedom, and they spent their days together. They became very successful vineyard makers, and they probably died in Pompeii. That they haven't found their bodies. And the whole premise of that second book is based on, this is all fiction now because you can't prove it's the same people. But as you walk into Pompeii, the main entrance, about the plaster cast, right? Mm. Plaster cast. So when Pompeii, when the pyroclastic flow came and wiped people out, it was so hot and so searing that the bodies disintegrated under the ash and then hardened in seconds. So basically, you have hollowed out images of people at their last minute. The bodies are essentially gone, but the hollowed out images of their last moment reaching and screaming are preserved, and that's what you see. So if you see these plaster casts, you're not looking at mummy, you are looking at filled in cement where people used to be. And there's two very curious people when you walk into the amphitheater entrance of Pompeii, and they're arm in arm. In their last minute, they're holding each other in embrace, in a very tender, close embrace. And for years, they were called the two maidens. They assumed it was a mother and a daughter. And it was only until DNA evidence, in the last 10 years, CAT scan and DNA, because there is a little bit of stuff left, skeletons and stuff, that they proved two things. They were both males, and they were not related. Now, we don't know if these were the Vetti or there were two other gay men. It could have been a shopkeep and some other guy he bumped into in a dead-end alley and held each other. But it seems unlike the embrace when you look at it, least in my eyes, in my romantic eyes, are two lovers. They went out together. And the fact that it's two men, and once again, it was probably dismissed as two gay guys for so long because of the times. Now, at least if you go there now, it would say, the two men. They don't call them lovers. But once again, it's another moment captured of gay life that's forgotten forever. So I use that as a springboard for who these characters are in my second book. Anything to kind of bring that world back to life and to kind of show that sexuality has kind of, gay life has taken a dark turn, and we haven't still quite recovered.
Yeah, so you're using, parts of history, factual things, or believed to be factual things, bringing them into your books to add, some good foundation. And it sounds like you've been all over the world, so many more places than I. So what sort of, when you think about your travels, what rises to the top as places you want to go back, places you wish you could explore more, or just great pieces of culture that you've had?
It's tricky because, again, I think the Middle East and Egypt is my happy place, but I've traveled to 70-some countries, and I'm always still surprised. I love the Southeast Asia and the Buddhist cultures. I'm very much a ruins freak. I can wander around for hours looking at the most denuded hunk of stone. My husband gets so friggin' bored. So can we get back in the van and the AC now? You're looking at that hunk of marble for the last 20 minutes, So I'm drawn towards those ancient cultures, be it Machu Picchu or be it Angkor Wat or Bagan in Indonesia. But I think I do love the more ancient. I love the ancient world. I'm never more happy than when I'm watching a sunset over the Mediterranean, or if I'm wandering down the Nile, or if I'm in some boat along the Mekong Delta. Something about those places I just find very transporting. A lot of places I haven't been. I haven't really been to the interior of Africa, though Timbuktu is an amazing place. I was on a shoot there for the History Channel, and we all got dysentery. So that got shut down quicker than we wanted it to be. But that's the trouble. Sometimes I've seen a lot of these countries working for National Geographic and Discovery, and it's very different going on holiday and working. People always say, oh, my God, you must be so lucky to see these things. And I am, to be able to have archaeologists open tombs for me or see the inside of castles, but I'm working as well. I'm on a budget, and I'm talking to New York and LA a lot. Did you get that shot yet? What's the budget like? You got to keep everybody happy. The cameraman's getting grumpy. Someone's starting to get sick from drinking the water. So a lot of times you're just in your hotel on the phone sweating. So that's a lot. If I answer that question, I just rambled, but there might be a nugget or two in there somewhere.
No, that's okay. It can't all be glamorous, but you can see some fun and cool things.
Like all travel, when you look back at it, you forget about the dodgy bits, and or they become so epic. Those are the ones you talk about. I find when I get back, nobody wants to hear about the wonderful falafel I had in the street of Tel Aviv. They want to hear about the time I got dysentery in India, because that's just a better story.
Of course, yes. So then, you've had all of these adventures. You've gotten to see a lot of places, and you've mentioned, some places you haven't gotten the chance to. How is it that you decided to kind of get into the media side of things instead of, say, like going into archaeology or studying things more in a like historical academic way than in an also pushing it out via the media?
I think I'd just be a lousy academic. I don't think I'm as clever as all that, quite frankly. I'd much rather tell stories about smart people than be one, you know? I mean, and I'm terrible with language and engineering, and like archaeologists. If I have some friends who are archaeologists, and it's not all Indiana Jones. A lot of it is someone down there with the brush, slowly getting rid of the sand off a piece of pottery shard that has no shape. But I'm a storyteller, and when I always thought as a kid I'd be a filmmaker making fiction films. I was enamored of it. I was the guy that'd stay up. I watched so many movies: The Seven Samurai, The Good, the Bad, and the Ugly, Lawrence of Arabia. I mean, those kind of epic films. I know every line of all those movies. So I've always been enamored of these epic Hollywood historical fantasies. And so I went to film school thinking I would do that. And I got my bachelor's of arts at Temple University in Philadelphia. And then I moved up to New York City thinking I would become Martin Scorsese overnight. And instead, I was the poor schlub, holding a walkie-talkie in the back of a grip truck at 2 a.m. in Queens so nobody would steal shit. That was a long way from Martin Scorsese. So I got kind of bored with that stuff, as you can imagine. And also, the calls weren't frequent, so I would spend a lot of time just waiting by the phone for it not to ring. And then I had so little money and nothing to do in New York, I started hanging out in the New York Public Library. And then one day I plucked a book off the shelf about Neolithic man. And I didn't get that in my small Catholic school in Greensburg, Pennsylvania, not by a long shot. And like a penny dropped, and I became so fascinated by history and prehistory and the rise of civilization, I kind of resolved to teach myself that while I was waiting for the next call. And since no one was calling, I went all the way up to Egypt, and but by that point, I became so fascinated with that part of the world that I just backpacked there instead. And then I knew I wanted to make documentaries. I knew that I no longer want to do the fiction films. I want to get out there, and I want to tell these stories, and I want to crawl to those tombs, and I want to meet the people, meet the archaeologists who are often wonderfully awkward and nerdy people, and make them the Indiana Jones they want to be. So it kind of became much more fun to tell stories through real life than create fiction, which now I'm doing, and that's a different story, but also to be the person that's down there in the trenches doing the hard work.
So then how did you kind of raise to the ranks of being able to go from just being in Egypt to being able to produce a lot of things?
Well, when I realized that after backpacking through the Middle East for like 8 or 9 months, I went to Egypt, Jordan, Iran, Syria, Turkey, Israel. Did I say that? I hit them all as much as I could. I had my head in the clouds. And again, I knew I wanted to figure out how someone could pay me to go back there. Otherwise, I'd go broke. I said, documentaries, ding. So I went back and I got my master's at Columbia College in Chicago. And my thesis film, because I had a friend whose father worked in the Antiquities Board, was about the Great Sphinx of Egypt. They were restoring it at the time. And I borrowed some money from my uncle, which I don't think I ever paid back. I'm not sure. This is 1997. I don't think he's looking for it at this point. But I made a film, my thesis film about the restoration of the Great Sphinx. And I had all this wonderful access. And I was using student film gear that I shouldn't have taken out of Chicago, let alone the Giza Plateau. And I made this film, and I was able to sell it to the Learning Channel as well. So not only was my thesis film, but I sold it to the Discovery Channel. TLC today should be called the Learning Channel. It's come a long way since... it used to make shows about the documentaries about the Sphinx, and now it does, dwarf wrestling or whatever the hell they're doing now. So, it's a different TLC. In 1997, you're still learning shit. So I sold it, and then I was able to get right into production. And I sort of became Mr. Archaeology, and I was kind of the go-to guy to go in the field and make these things. And that's what I did for 10 years. Probably made, 60 or 70 hours of shows. Not all archaeology. I did weight loss shows and other kind of, pay the bill stuff. But then I got a job at the network, become executive producer for the networks. And that means that I said, you ought to make the shows. And then I gave you a bunch of notes and said, what the hell were you thinking? So the last 10 years or so, 15 years, I've been on the network side, the buyer rather than the seller. And I lost my job last year. And that's what brought me back to, I'm still working in television as a freelancer, because books don't sell. But it allowed me to embrace that other love of telling the stories again, telling fiction, and blending my experience as a gay TV producer in the field into something fantastical and comedic. And the books are not hard. The books are love stories, but they're more in kin with Neil Gaiman, than they are like some heavy duty archaeological tryst. They're fun.
And so then when you kind of had to make this bit of a switch to being a freelancer and you decided to start the writing. What was it like to write that first novel and get this story out there?
It was hard. It's fascinating because you kind of go in thinking, well, hell, I got 2 Emmy nominations and a BAFTA nominations, and I'm going to do this overnight. It's a totally different way of storytelling. I floundered and flopped around for a long time until I found my voice. Like any new creative thing, you have to learn it from grounds up. So what television did teach me was signposting and teasing and cause and effect and all the things you need to do in a television hour with lots of commercial breaks and stuff, how to keep the audience interested. That was wonderful stuff that I was able to bring from television. But writing literature, writing literary is so different than writing a blueprint script that my first attempts were just, long-winded rubbish. I look at the next day and say, oh my God, I'm just spending 20 minutes talking about posts and lintels in an ancient Egyptian tomb rather than telling a story because I got on some rabbit hole. So I had to learn it over. And yet the challenge was exciting. It made creativity vital again. And that's why I enjoyed so much because like anybody does something for a long time, 25 years plus doing documentaries gets a bit samey. Regardless of the subject, the style becomes the same. So it was kind of fun to throw myself out there and challenge myself. And particularly, I remember I did it in 2016 as I wrote my first novel. And two things happened in 2016 that made me say, okay, get off your butt, Neil, and do it. One was I turned 50. And the other one was my idol, the guy that gave me so much joy in life creativity was David Bowie. And Bowie died. And Bowie was such a master of reinvention and so fearless in everything he did. And even though I knew every one of his albums and became, like an obsessive Bowie freak, reading his obituary just reminded me, if this guy can reinvent himself, in 27 albums, surely I can do it once. Surely I got one trick up my sleeve. I'm not trying to be Bowie, but it's like, okay, Bowie's gone now, and it's like if he taught a legacy is he creates his own world with each album he did. Why can't I do that? So that got me to write my first novel, which was all about ancient history. He doesn't know time travel, which is much more serious, though still adventure-y. And I couldn't get an agent for it because it was my first book, and I was still finding my voice, but I loved it so much, I kept going back again and again and again. And each book, I think, got smoother and better. And I feel much more confident that I am now a novelist. I'm not some guy who's trying to get to be a novelist. I'm a novelist.
And so then, if you had the chance to go back to full-time being an executive producer, would you take that chance and keep writing on the side? Do you think this is going to be like dual life from here on out?
One good question. It's a damn good question. It depends on how many bills are due that day. Because obviously there's, books don't pay, publishing doesn't pay, and the cut rate. So these books are very much at the moment an act of love. Every book I sell on Amazon, anyone listening, if you buy one of my book on Amazon, already my algorithm goes up and I go get a gold star if I hit the top 100. I mean, it's all very small sales and very small. So, I'm not going to teeter off an antiquity or rich man if I stick with just novels. And I love television. I have people there. I just finished a job for the History Channel. A friend of mine works there, and I did a 2-month stint with her. It was wonderful and very creative people. I'm not down on the business, but I know I very much want to marry the two. I would definitely find a way, even if I get that executive job, to keep writing. Because I did that. My first 3 novels were written while I was a EP at the network. But now in the last year, I was able to publish one and get the second one, Pompeii, ready to go. And then I take off to Troy in 2 weeks, to Turkey for a month in 2 weeks to write the next one. Because, I got a lot of free time.
And so are you kind of doing like immersive culture then when you're writing these books to be one with the culture that you're writing about?
Yeah, I mean, it's a tricky thing because obviously I've been to Turkey, half dozen times and other places I've been to. It's not like I'm discovering it. It's hard to kind of step in the same river twice, as the cliche goes. And I've been to Troy and these places. But Pompeii is a wonderful example. Pompeii I've only been to once before. I went there, and last fall on my nice severance check from Discovery Channel, I went to Naples for a month. I was getting paid for those 4 weeks. But it was wonderful because I hadn't seen Pompeii in so long, so I would get up in the morning and write, and then I would take the train from Naples or Sorrento into Pompeii, and I just walk around and take notes, and then I'd go back and I'd add those things into my book the next day. So it really was a sense of discovery and being there. I'd walk down an alley I'd never seen before, and that became a scene in the book. So it was very much being immediately. The reaction was very immediate to what I was seeing, and that kind of writing made me write very quickly. And also, I think because it was my third book, I was more comfortable with my craft, and I knew where my strengths and my weaknesses lies. But that's the kind of thing that really inspires me, just being in that landscape. So when I go to Turkey, I'm not going to Troy, because Troy is actually a bit of a hole. It's a depressing place, except for a wooden horse that was fake that they put up for the tourist in the 60s or something. Totally fake and cheesy. There's not much to see in Troy. It's just a big pile of denuded rocks. So I'm actually down south, but there's a bunch of Greco-Roman ruins. There's beautiful trails. There's the Aegean Sea. All the stuff Homer writes about is right there. So I'm hoping that same kind of inspiration will rub off in a visual way as opposed to actually a physical one.
And do you have plans for future books, like where those will be located and what they sort of history they'll focus on?
But I don't. I mean, this is obviously a sequel. This is a series of books now, the same characters in all three. It's about a time-traveling TV crew that goes to all three of these places, Egypt, Rome, and then Greece. I may have them go to the Renaissance or the Crusades next. I don't know. Or I may say it's time to do something else. I'm really not sure where I go yet, but I know I want to at least write a trilogy of them and get these characters out there. And then try something else. But always be informed about travel. All my books take place abroad, and all of them have gay characters. That's one thing that I really want to keep, because I think it's a unique slice that very few people write about. A lot of people who write about traveling or ancient history, but not the gay angle, or vice versa. So blending, I got a lot of response from people on Facebook who bought my books on Amazon, and they love the fact that I'm making a gay Indiana Jones that just happens to be gay and love us. So because there's so few people, that's not served. That's an audience that's not served, which is straight up adventure. So I kind of want to write books for that audience. But whether the next one will be fantasy or more serious, I have no bloody idea yet. I'll let you know when I get there.
That's okay. You had the plan to do the trilogy, and you're making that happen. I wasn't sure you already knew where the characters were going to keep going, or maybe you'll do something else.
Yeah, it's like I'm really, people always shock when you make books. I like to kill my characters off. So who knows? Maybe by the end of it, they'll all be dead, and I have to write a new series.
I don't know. In soap operas, they tend to bring people back to life, I've heard.
They do. It doesn't matter. They come back over and over again. And of course, it's fantasy, and it's about the underworld and stuff, so anybody can come back. It's like, the slasher flicks. Jason and Freddy always come back.
Yes, you're the author. You can, have it.
It's my world, baby. You're just living in it.
Mm-hmm. Exactly. So then, with all of your travel and your, passion in history, what keeps you from, say, moving abroad full time?
Well, my husband, he's 10 years younger than me, and he's a journalist. He's here in New York. So his job keeps him here. He has to be in New York 2 days a week. And, once again, it's not like there's great money in it. So I'm on his insurance. So a lot of it is just the logic of being on Carl's insurance in Brooklyn, which keeps me here for the moment. But we talk about it all the time. We know we want to settle probably in the Eastern Mediterranean. We talk about it all the way. We have so many friends over there. We love that landscape. We're particularly Turkey. We're big fans of Turkey. I mean, it's a question of going to that country as an aging gay couple and healthcare, and who knows if things become more radical. So we have to keep that in mind particularly as a gay couple, as you get older. You have to be aware of just, where you are settling down, because the last thing you want to be in a place that's intolerant.
Right.
And so a lot of these places may indeed be that. But yeah, we absolutely have our eye towards a little villa overlooking the sea somewhere, and ideally some, broken pillar and temple within walking distance.
Yes, keep the history close.
You know what? I bought into it so far, I might as well just own it completely, right?
Yes. And so then, do you have any fascination with history within the U.S.?
I mean, it's I never have as a kid. I've always been I think it's that sense of adventure and the exotic that took me out there. And I love the ancient world because they did it first and early. But I love history. Like I mean, I made shows for history and discovery for years, and a lot of them about the Civil War, a lot of them about the Cold War. About shipwrecks from the World War II. I love a good history and a good mystery. So I'm not like I'm bored by American history. I just like to go further back, I think. And I think that the more unknown it is, the more intriguing it is. So, 20th century history doesn't interest me much because it's all documented to death. I want to go there was kind of like, what is the truth here? Can we kind of play with it a bit? And that's just in my bones to kind of like just imagine what could have been. Mm. So, yes, I love American history, and I certainly would never say no to it. Would I write a novel about it? I don't know. I started writing a novel. My parents grew up in Pittsburgh, and one of the novels I played with, it's a fascinating relic we have in the family. My dad's side, the Lairds, very Irish Catholic from Homestead, PA, the steel mills. And my father, as the eldest son, has a Pinkerton gun from 1898 with 4 notches in it. And it passes down from eldest son to eldest son. And there was a big Pinkerton strike in 1898 in Pittsburgh where Carnegie tried to stop the mill workers, did stop the mill workers from a labor strike. It was one of the big first labor strikes and killed many people. And 4 Pinkerton guards were killed in that. So the mystery always is this one of the guns that killed one of the Pinkerton guards? And was it one of my great uncle or somebody was a cop, a Homestead cop? So for all we know, he could have taken out one of these Pinkerton, and it was such an heirloom that it passes down like it's the Hope Diamond from family to family. There's a story there too. And I started digging, I went to the archives in Homestead and started digging around a few years ago. And of course you go down the rabbit holes. So that could be a story as well. Just kind of, and then I can kind of focus in on my own family, what it was like growing up in the mill turn of the century. I think I'm open to anything.
Yeah, no, I think it's just interesting because your fascination is more in the ancient, as you said, kind of the unknown. The fact that you haven't gotten the chance yet to kind of settle down more full time outside of the United States, though you've had these longer stints of being and learning abroad.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, exactly. And, it's like, and, as you get older, you start thinking more about your own past too. And I think now looking at my parents, and who are, bless their heart, they're still around, but so many people are gone. I sort of wonder, what was it like for them? What was it like to grow up in, the shadows of the steel mills in the 1800s? Things you don't think about until you recognize there are people in your lives who can tell you that kind of stuff. They're a reservoir of knowledge, and you kind of want to write that down. So there's a million great stories to tell.
Yes, definitely. And so then you've got this whole stick going on now. You're writing, you're leaning more into the fiction. Which do you prefer, fiction or nonfiction?
Well, that's a tough one. Can I pick both? It's not like one speaks to me more. I love the process of documentary more than watching them, I think, only because I've watched so bloody many. I've made 1,000 hours of television, and I've watched thousands of more, and I've been on film bureau or film festival juries, so I watched dozens of documentaries. Chicago Film. There's a lot of documentaries I've gone through there. I just want new stories to listen to or to play. But I love documentary because I love the nimbleness of the craft. A film crew, a big budget Hollywood film would have 100 and some people on it. Most of these films that I shot in Egypt and India and Cambodia and Machu Picchu, there were like 3 or 4 of us. And we're just flying by the seat of our pants, and we didn't know what's going to happen until we get there. And, one time I was on a boat off the coast of Sicily, and they couldn't find the boat, and the mafia was after us. I got arrested by the Guardia Civil once in Spain. Trust me, none of that was scripted. So shit happens when you make documentaries that don't happen when you're telling a fiction film. But I love the creativity and the ability to make stuff up and to play with history and to play with characters of the fiction. And if you read it in my books, they're very documented. Pompeii, for example, it's about the film crew. They got the dates wrong, and they have 48 hours to get out of Pompeii. What people don't know is that took 48 hours for Pompeii to be destroyed. So anyone who was still there was really stupid. They had all the... But it's all recorded. First came the pumice stones, then came the earthquakes, then came the fires, then finally the pyroclastic flow at 6:08 on November 24th, 39 AD. This kind of document. So I take all that research and I create a fictional story, a time travel story. But hopefully anyone who reads my books know that the facts are there. The facts are true. So in a way, I'm sort of melding the two. I do my heavy research with history, some that I already know, others that I just do deep dive, and I bring that in a fantastical way into fiction.
Yeah, no, it's definitely a genre that can pique some interest to bring in the factual while also having a fun fictional story. Now, in your hours and hours of film that you produced, did you ever get the chance to be part of something really big, some new discovery, or something that kind of really, you can say, like, I was a part of that moment?
Certainly in Egypt, they've had documentary. And it's not like I was there when they found King Tut's mask, and everything's so seminal that it'll go down the annals of history, as you were there then. But I've had amazing. My first show that I did in ancient Egypt, and this is less about. I'll tell you another story about a greater find in a second. But my first experience in Egypt with a tomb was when the director of the Giza Plateau, Zahi Hawass, who's still around, he was showing us around, and they just found these small beehive tombs of the workers who had built the pyramids. This was the mid-90s or whatever, and they were very modest tombs. But they were, had been hidden for 4,500 years. And while we were there with our camera, our student camera, just the one that had a student camera, and my friend and I are shooting it, they open it up. And what I remember, I get a little chills just kind of think about it now, was just a modest-looking beehive tomb, and they open it up. There's a little door they pull back, and inside is just a guy in a fetal position, not mummified, a worker, with a bunch of clay pots around him. And two things happened that showed me just how privileged I was to be there, but also just how destructive archaeology can be in a way. As soon as we opened it, the first thing that happened was all this hot air raced out. 4,500 years of hot air that's been trying to get out raced by me, and I almost can feel like my eyebrows got singed. It was so hot. It was an oven just waiting to get out. I was breathing Pharaoh's air. I was breathing the air that the people who entombed this man were breathing when they put this guy to rest 4,500 years ago. And in the few moments, the air was gone and it cooled down. In the few moments we were talking about it, looking at it and making some measurements, all the clay pots broke and started to dissolve because they were preserved in this bubble for the last 4.5 millennia. And now our new air that we came in, we destroyed them. And they just crumbled to bits in front of us. And they weren't anything special. They get so many bloody clay pots, but these are clay pots that were just so ancient. And in seconds, they were gone, just by us being there. So in a way, I saw this moment, this privileged moment of what it was like before, the last people who buried it, and then it went to a museum. But very quickly, I think the most amazing show I did was a few years ago, one of the last ones I did for Discovery. We did 3 shows about King Tut's anniversary. And they also, Zahi Hawass, who's still digging down in Luxor in Egypt, he found a lost city that was buried since King Tut's time, which is about 3,500 years ago. And it was an entire lost city of workers, probably the people who made the masks and made all the jewels. And people you find tombs in Egypt, but you don't find cities because they're made of mud brick and they disappear. And the only reason it's saved is the strangest thing. It was boarded up and abandoned. All the windows were boarded up with brick, and there was a slipper left behind, and there was a horse left behind, and people just abandoned this town and never returned, and it got swept in by sand. So we found our own sort of Pompeii in Egypt, and we don't know why they abandoned it, what happened. They never came back, but it's a huge city, and they're still digging it today, and they will be digging it for the next 20, 15 years. So, if you read the archaeology in magazines and things, every couple of weeks they're talking about a new find there, because finally, for the first time, you can see how the regular people lived in ancient Egypt, not the pharaohs and the kings and the queens, but the artisans, the people like us, the worker bees that were out there doing it. Never been found before, and it was just it was a perfect capstone to my career. As if I don't make another film in Egypt, it was the perfect capstone.
Awesome. It sounds like you've had some great moments, lots of things to have recorded and been put out there. And it's very exciting to hear, your love for all of this and just everything as it's happened. And, you've been a part of those pieces of history. Now, before I start to wrap things up at the end here, is there anything else you would like to share with the listeners today?
Only that if you're fascinated by these places, don't hesitate, go. I have so many people say, I wish I would have gone to Egypt when I was younger, or I'm going to wait until it settles down. First of all, you can go at any time, and the Middle East will never settle down, so just go now. So if you want to see the pyramids, get off your bloody ass and go see the pyramids. Go travel. Travel informed my life in so many different ways. Beyond the sexuality, beyond the TV, beyond the novels. Travel, none of this would have been possible if I didn't travel, if I didn't sort of become fearless and just throw myself into this stuff and just make it as I go. It shaped my life in profound ways, and I just had to go off and do it. And you can do it when you're 24, you can do it when you're 64, it doesn't matter. But if you're sitting listening to this and saying, I've always wanted to see Machu Picchu, well, you know what? It's only a click away on Expedia. Just do it.
Yes. And, and you can hear from your stories how much it's shaped you. So encouraging people to, get out there and travel safely, see what you want to see, always such good things. And at the end of all my episodes, I do ask my guests a random question. So my question for you today is, do you enjoy alone time?
I very much, as a writer, my God, I'd be lost without it. I very much do. I'm very comfortable, I think, in my own skin. I think I got to that point now where maybe was more the extrovert, became more the introverted. So yeah, I can. I'm going off to Turkey for a month by myself. The husband isn't coming. It's me sitting there writing a novel, and I can't wait. I can't wait for that month of just me and sunsets and my laptop.
All right, that brings this episode to a close. So, of course, Neil has talked about lots of great things in his life today. So, if you want to connect with him and all these great things, there will be some links in the description. So, the 2 books that he's talked about most, those links directly on Amazon to check those Primetime Traveler books out. And, of course, his social media, he talked about the gay_history. So, on TikTok and Instagram. So, that will be there as well. And or possibly his website. We'll see what works best in the description, but there will definitely be things there for you to connect with him, so feel free to check that out. And of course, if you do read the book, you can always go in and review it on Amazon. It's always appreciated. And if you'd like to connect with the podcast, our website is in the description as well. We are on social media. That is on our website. We are on Instagram, Facebook, and LinkedIn if you want to go follow those pages. There's also all of the past episodes. It's always great to go back and listen to new ones, check out past guests' social media, links, and resources. All of that is there on the website. And if you'd like to support the podcast monetarily, there is a link to do that as well. Or if you would like to be a guest on the show and share your story, my email is in the description. That is always the best way to reach me. So thank you so much, Neil, for spending time with me today, and to my listeners for taking the time out of your day to hear a new story. Until next time, bye.
It was a great pleasure. Thanks for having me. Cheers.